I have a lot of ideas. I like to think a lot, and often these ideas are just taken from either, oh, the book says this, or oh, the movie that I just watched told me that, or oh, the video game that I just played gave me this idea. And that's perfectly fine. But one thing that I've kind of struggled with and changed around a lot over the course of me being a dungeon master, as it were, is the fact that I change the way that I format my notes and the way that I present my adventures from game to game, from thing to thing, from session to session, and I basically improvise whatever I think is going to help me the most at that point in time, which I think is a perfectly fine way to do it. But I am here today to give you some recommendations on some ways that you could perhaps get your ideas down on paper or in your Word document or whatever else that you're going to use to take some notes. So first off is the appliance that you use. I personally run only one game as of current that I am running using the virtual tabletop platform Roll20. And the way that I do it to keep everything all in one place and easily accessible for me is I use the built-in feature where you can write as many notes as you want and put them wherever you want. I think that to some people it can definitely feel more clustered, and it's not the best organization tool. Things can get lost sometimes, but for me personally it served me well over the past year and a half, coming on 2 years or something, and it's pretty simple and easy to use. There are a couple kinks with it, but overall it's very good, and I find I can format all my notes well on there and access them all without ever having to switch a tab or bring up anything else, or even have to look to my side really. It's all right there on the one screen that I can look at. Now, this is a perfectly fine way of doing it, and you can categorize things, but it's not the nicest to look at. If you're a person who is much more of a visual learner, for example, then you might benefit more from something that can incorporate loads of images wherever you need them and stuff like that, random information, and really a lot more freeform formatting, and that's where OneNote comes in. Microsoft OneNote I admittedly have been able to use for free because I'm a student at a college or something, so we get like free Microsoft Forever or something. I don't know, but I've used that from time to time. I'm currently using it to note down things for an upcoming adventure that I may be running in about 2 months. It's going to be in person, and it's going to be very minimal in comparison to, I do quite a lot of prep for my Sunday game, which is currently the only game that I'm actually running, which, again, I said that earlier, but like I want to emphasize that because around maybe the start of these sorts of series, I was running around 3 to 4 at a time, and that is just not something that I think many people should do if they can. Unless they can make it their full-time career or something, I wouldn't do that if I were you. But that's just my personal advice. In any case, if that's something that you feel like you could use OneNote, then go for it. Some interesting features are anything can link to anything. You can have very different pages of different aesthetics. You can pack as many pictures or anything on there as you want. And there's really no limitation on the space. With OneNote, for example, no, not with OneNote, with Word, for example, you've got your A4 sheet, that's basically it. You can sometimes make it go the other way. OneNote doesn't really have a page, more so it's just you open it up and then it's an infinitely expanding white blank canvas for you to put whatever you want on it, which can definitely help those more creatively artistic or people who find that more sporadic and random formatting can actually help them, you know, organize chaos, if you will. The last recommendation that I have is Google Docs. Google Docs has some neat features. For example, if you, for reference, it's another free one. You can go into Google Docs, and if you put a title there, on the left of your screen now you can click on that title and it takes you to there. It's a very simple feature. I imagine other programs have it, but I've personally found it quite useful for formatting, not my notes in particular, but I've used OneNote a lot for, I made a player guide for it recently, in fact, like a 2-page little thing that basically said, here are some new rules that I'm changing or going back on, etc., etc. And that's basically what I've mostly used it for. That, and I've occasionally wrote some detailed backstories of NPCs or characters that I want on a larger document that I can cycle through easily. And yeah, I find that it's pretty good organizationally, but if you're not into the restrictive style of those sorts of things, then that's absolutely fine. So let's assume that you now have decided where you want to put your things. There's also, of course, the paper option, but I don't need to tell you how paper and pen works. Now, the question is, where do you go from there? I'm gonna just randomly fire off an adventure idea that I think, I don't know, might be useful to you as well. I like to sprinkle in my videos little things of like, here's a random idea that you can use, even though it doesn't really pertain to the video so much. So let's come up with an adventure for my Sunday game party. Right now, they are in a small village called New Sire in the realm of Corvair, in the world of Eberron, and they have basically been there for a short while, and I'm thinking, what thing could I perhaps throw at them that constitutes a decent enough adventure, but I don't want to overwhelm them with pacing or something. They are near, in fact, almost built around a mountainside that's pretty, like, not that steep at the start. It's more so just large rocky crags and such. But as you get higher up, it becomes a lot more, you know, mountainous, as mountains tend to be. And I'm thinking that perhaps a recent plague of eagles slash giant eagles slash bloodhawks have been trying to prey on the villagers, currently to no success, but they appear to be coming in larger numbers more recently and stuff like that, and it's getting kind of concerning. Perhaps their young are finally old enough to start flying down and hunting, and these bloodhawks, their only real proper prey is down on the ground, so they're swooping down and trying to attack people. And the party's objective is to basically navigate up the mountain with some tough travel, perhaps with a random encounter with some of these bloodhawks or giant eagles or something, and then finally they make their way to the nest, which is a small, maybe 4-room dungeon. Formatting a dungeon is an entirely separate thing that I'll probably do in a maybe like a sequel video to this, but for now, let's just figure out how we're going to format this entire small adventure. One way of doing it is simply knowing that that's what's going to happen. That's an absolutely fine way of doing it. The only thing I'd really say you'd need to prep for that if you want to be ready is making sure you know the statistics of whatever creature, whatever eagle or hawk or anything that you're going to be running is, and general ideas of challenge ratings and how much of a challenge each encounter that you force onto the party are going to be. Not force, give to. That's what DMs do. They give you encounters, they don't force them. And once you've kind of done that, you can run it. Now, that's personally a way that I can do it. However, recently I've tried to properly format things so that I have some level of a structure to my games, because when I was first starting out, I rarely prepared anything and just fired it off from my brain as I went, and that worked perfectly fine for my players. But for my own conscience, I noticed a lot more mistakes under the surface that I wanted to repair. So let's properly prep it. Go into your, you know, application of choice and first consider what encourages them to do it other than what's around them. If the party, for example, has heard of this, they might not want to do anything unless someone is perhaps incentivizing them to go along with it with a bit of pay or something else. So perhaps the local village mayor asks it of them or something. And that's all you really have to write down. Perhaps a name and general sentence or two about their identity, you know, pronouns, race, a little tidbit of backstory and or motivation beyond just I want to protect my townsfolk and stuff like that. Or it could be an old adventurer who wants to deal with the problem themselves, but they are too old and unable to do so, and therefore hire a bunch of more spry younger folk who are much more able than them. So that's how you get them up there. And then the next level of prep is looking into mountain travel. There are likely mountain travel rules somewhere, likely in the Dungeon Master's Guide. If not, there are going to be supplementary rules somewhere, or you can make your own. Now, you might think, okay, so I've got that, and I'll just look them up when it comes to it. You might lose it. So what I'd recommend is, if you can, and if you feel like you want to, go ahead and type in the entire thing. Go ahead and add all the rules to where your notes are in a section around it, because you're likely to either forget or not find it. And if it's in the middle of where the adventure's happening, then you know what to do no matter what, and it keeps the pacing going and the adventure going, instead of you looking through the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5 minutes or coming up with extremely haphazard and unsatisfactory, at least to you, rules that end up not being that good. So definitely write that down. Similarly, I try and make sure that there is a very easy link to any stat block of an NPC or a creature that I'm going to run that will only take 20 seconds tops to get properly locked and loaded with initiative and everything, because I like things in my game to be pretty fast in terms of like pacing, so that the party has more room to kind of, you know, be in the moment, be in the tension. And when you've got your stat blocks and rules on other stuff around, you should be good. From there's some more specifics that you might want to figure out. So if you don't like the rules, perhaps you can change them and stuff, and perhaps consider some encounters that they can come across on the way. A way that I like to do it is that I like to write down a few encounters that I could spring on the party at any point. If I want that to be influenced by a dice roll, then I ask them to roll, but it's not always true unless I have a specific random encounter table planned. And you can write down 2 encounters. One is a few mountain goats that cause a bit of a problem the way that they're going, and are likely the only other way around them is going to take another hour, and they're just stood there being annoying, and that's a way for them to go around it. They're not going to fight them or anything. The goats will run at the first sign of like big noise. But yeah, it's something that happens on the road or something, if you want that. And then the other one could be perhaps an interception from the beasts, the eagles, the hawks and stuff like that. If you want it to be an intensely exploration heavy thing, it could take them 2 days to get there, and on the first day, part of the climb is figuring out where they're going to find a place to sleep, because they will likely suffer exhaustion and die otherwise. Because mountain climbing for 24 hours straight does not sound lovely. I'll tell you that. It doesn't sound brilliant. Once they're there, then you can also format the dungeon, which again I might make a future video on. And they root out the nest or something and are rewarded with not much from the particular nest itself, due to the nest perhaps, you know, only really having food and stuff. But when they go back down, which is also going to be somewhat of an adventure, so you might have something planned, they get their reward. And that's some general good adventure structure that could make up a session, and I feel like it would do a decent enough job of it. These are some basic tips on how you can generally write down what and like plan around what you want to do. And I made up this entire thing on the spot, and if I can, then so can you, because I've not been doing this as long in comparison to most others in the RPG game scene. I imagine there are other people giving out much better advice for this sort of stuff, but this is stuff from my personal experience. In any case, if you found this at all helpful, or if you have any additional advice, programs or methods in which you can take notes with and make sure that your adventure is more formatted, leave them in the comments or join our Discord and talk about them there, which you can find in the description. You can also like the video and subscribe if you want to see more of this stuff. I just kind of ramble about whatever I want, really, and then it gets edited and posted as a YouTube video, so I'm living the life of a 12-year-old, I guess. Thank you for watching, and I'll see ya.